Hello everybody, I'm George from Ireland. So here I am at the Bloody Sunday Memorial in Derry. Recalling the events of the 30th of January 1972 when 28 people were shot by the Parachute Regiment of the British Army. 13 of them died that day. Another man died of his injuries about a month later. So yeah, the rest wounded. I'm not sure if any of those wounded are still alive today. Quite possibly. You see that of the people who were shot dead, was it 5 of them were age 17 at the time. They're all men and boys. So anyway, the trouble's already been going for some time. By that stage, for about 2.5 years. So it's a very tense situation. Internment had been introduced the August before. That's to say, people could be arrested on suspicion of being part of a terrorist organisation like the Ulster Volunteer Force or the IRA, and then held without trial or charge for a while. They're all released by the end of 1975, but some of them had been abused in custody, subject to the 5 techniques. Anyway, so the conflict was already going, and the IRA and the security forces were already killing each other. And 2 days before, 2 Royal Ulster Constabulary officers had been murdered in Derry. The RUC, that was the police. But anyway, feeling was running very high. There were regular clashes, less than lethal clashes between the army and local young men here in the Bogside, the Derry Young Hooligans, as the British Army used to call them. Anyhow, there was an anti-internment march that was banned, went ahead anyway, because people in this area largely didn't recognise the legitimacy of the government. And so that broke up, people went away, some sort of confrontation with the security forces. Somebody started firing, as in one of the Parachute Regiment, more of them started firing, and so on. So all those people were killed. An ambulance was taking a wounded man to hospital. It was stopped and searched by the soldiers, slowing things down, which might have led to his death, and maybe they were able to save him had the ambulance been able to go straight away, and so on. So one of the British Army officers interviewed right away afterwards on television said, no, we killed some gunmen, and so forth. Did he believe that, or had he been lied to by his men? And the soldiers had been ordered to fire, they'd opened fire, they'd ordered to stop firing, and some of the paratroopers carried on firing for a few minutes after ordered to stop, and so on. As one particular guy shot 5 people, and he shot someone who was already wounded on the ground. I mean, maybe it's going to say that's the coup de grace. So anyway, was the IRA going to fight back? And one of the dons who taught me said, no, the IRA said that's actually a golden opportunity for us, because showing the army to look very, very bad, that we did nothing. I know there was a claim that the IRA fired 1 shot. So the Royal Ulster Constabulary, they were on the walls of Derry. You can't quite make out on this angle behind me. And was it that they shot and then it ricocheted, or it felt like an echo, sort of an echo chamber down here? And the cityscape's almost unrecognisable from 1972 now. The Rossville flats have been demolished. Anyway, so an inquiry was held. Local people were reluctant to participate, worried it might be a whitewash, but they were convinced by some of the local clergy to participate. Edward Daly, who was a local priest, with Catholic of course, and there's the famous photograph of him holding the handkerchief, the white handkerchief, as 2 men are leading a wounded man to safety, signalling, we're coming, please don't shoot. Edward Daly, who was later made Bishop of Derry. Anyway, so the Lord Widgery was the judge who led the inquiry, and Edward Heath was the Prime Minister at the time, a Conservative. Notoriously, the Minute recorded Edward Heath saying to Widgery, remember, we're fighting a propaganda as well as a military war. So it seemed like he was leaning on Widgery to write something which was excusatory of the paratroopers, which is not to say that Widgery succumbed to the pressure. Widgery's conclusions have largely been discredited, but maybe not because of what Edward Heath said. Nowadays it would be regarded as highly improper. Him attempting to sway things was that political interference in the independence of the judiciary, which would these days be in contravention of the Constitutional Reform Act. So yeah, some of the local politicians saying how they're anti-sectarian. The Civil Rights Association, that movement going to the mid-1960s. And here's an image of the late Edward Daly. Here's the priest just after the shooting stopped. Okay, so there was a considerable risk to himself trying to lead wounded people to safety. Anyhow, so I met in Coleraine, this commission on Bloody Sunday, and it reported a few months later and took depositions of lots of people. And I've read his report, and some of the depositions were very condemnatory of the Parachute Regiment and so on. And a local coroner, who was a unionist, said it was sheer unadulterated murder. and so forth. Now there were claims that one of the men who was killed had been handling a pipe bomb earlier in the day, but apparently one of them had found a pipe bomb was found on his corpse, but actually that was planted there by some of the paratroopers, attempt to justify what they'd done. Anyway, so the Widgery report came out, said at some points the firing bordered on reckless, and it largely blamed the organisers of this march going ahead with an illegal march when tensions were running very, very high, making it even worse. So that was it. So it was overwhelmingly rejected by the people of the Bogside, by the survivors, by the relatives of the dead. And so it was long a nationalist demand to reopen the inquiry, and eventually, pursuant to the Good Friday Agreement, that was done. And then there was the Savile inquiry, which met for 12 years, cost hundreds of millions of pounds. And obviously technology had moved on, and through computer technology they were able to reconstruct what the streets were like, what the buildings were like, what people would be able to see from different angles, gather all the photos, all the video footage. Now remember 1972, cameras were still expensive. It wasn't the case the average person had a camera, or video cameras, there are very few of those. But anyway, hear from a lot of witnesses. Of course, between 1972 and 1998, quite a few people had died. And the hearings involving the soldiers were held in London for their safety. Anonymised soldier A, B, C, D, E, F, and so forth. All right, so anyway, they finally concluded. Some of the hearings were here in the Guildhall in Derry, and the Savile inquiry. Well, the outcome was very different to Widgery, and Savile largely denounced what the paratroopers had done, said it was unjustified and unjustifiable, and things like that. So some murder charges have been laid against some of the paratroopers involved, but I don't know what the outcome of the trials, because since the Good Friday Agreement, people convicted of all sorts of crimes have been let out early. Even those serving life sentences for murder, including terrorists and including 2 members of the Scots Guards who shot dead Peter McBride in 1993, and they were set free in 1998 and even allowed to rejoin their regiment. So what about the Savile inquiry? So if these guys are found guilty of murder regarding 1972, and there's no statute of limitations in the United Kingdom, will they be sentenced to life? Will they have to serve that? I mean, some in their 70s now. Some people say it's inequitable. Either you prosecute everybody still for the end of the Troubles, or you prosecute nobody. You can't prosecute some and not others. I mean, I'm for drawing a line under things and saying, okay, nobody be prosecuted, and justice isn't for this family or that family. Justice is for its own sake. It's not to be partial, and that nobody be prosecuted for anything. Do these all these inquiries and commissions, do they do us any good? Is that really the best way to spend the public money, rather than try to move on? Is it not reopening old wounds? So, goodness, I've not read the Savile inquiry because it's very, very long, it's very exhaustive. Surely no incident where 14 people were killed has ever been investigated so exhaustively and at such exorbitant expense. Imagine if every death like that was investigated to do with the Troubles. The cost would be ruinous. I know you might say, well, what price is justice? Okay, but there are real financial constraints. So the parachute regiment was clearly the wrong unit to have here. It's a spearhead force seen as ultra aggressive. You can see how there's a place for that in an army, but this was a delicate situation. It was a low intensity conflict. Frank Kitson, one of the army officers involved here, had written the book Low Intensity Conflicts about Kenya. So this is not as in there is an enemy with a clear position and then destroy him, fire everything you can at them. It's not like that. We're trying to allow civilian life to go on normally insofar as possible. And one of the things is, obviously, they say a soldier makes a poor policeman. He, or sometimes nowadays she, is not trained for that. And obviously they got it wrong. They tended to overreact, treat it as a battle. If they identify someone as an enemy, kill him immediately. Policing is about minimum force, whereas obviously the military is about overwhelming force. So yeah, showing where the walls of Derry are. And the time of Bloody Sunday, that's where the Royal Ulster Constabulary, some of the RUC, the police would have been up there, okay? Anyway, thank you very much for watching my video, and make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate on PayPal. Okay, so have a good day, and I'm very glad that we live in peace. I'm not a military person, I've never been a soldier for all sorts of reasons. I wouldn't want to deal with these situations. People say, well, the paratroopers were in a very difficult situation. They were attacked with bricks and petrol bombs almost every day, and then they snapped and so on. Okay, but on the other hand, This is the job they volunteered for. Right? They're always banging on about how courageous they are, so this is your chance to come and prove it. You know, I've never been a soldier for all sorts of reasons. I wouldn't want to cope with kind of situations. So military people, they're not my sort of people. And an army is a necessary evil. It'd be much better if we didn't have to have armies, but we do. And obviously, discipline is crucial. Obeying orders, even if you dislike them. Not doing whatever you want. Keeping your emotions in check. Right, thank you and goodbye.